There are some things that cannot be taken back: words, actions, and fire. The night Elias burned his harvest, he thought he was making a point. He thought he was proving his worth. But as the sky turned orange for miles around, the only thing he proved was how much one man could lose in a single hour. His neighbors watched from their porches miles away. They saw the end of a legacy and whispered that Elias had finally gone mad. They were half right. Pride is a kind of madness, and Elias had been breathing it in for years. Before the fire, there was the soil. Elias was not a dreamer. He was a creature of the earth, a farmer. Third generation. His grandfather had arrived with nothing but a sack of seed and a hunger for land. He planted the first seed on this very spot. His father had built on that. He taught Elias every secret the soil held, how to listen to the rain before it fell. He taught him that you cannot rush the earth. Elias learned patience before he even learned to read his own name. And when it was Elias's turn, he made it perfect. 40 acres of wheat that looked like a sea of gold under the prairie sun. It was the kind of grain that bends, but never breaks. The kind that whispers secrets when the wind moves through the stalks at night. Elias had spent 11 years building toward this specific harvest. 11 years of watching the horizon for storms that never came. 11 years of broken backs, early mornings, and hands that never quite got clean of the dust. This was supposed to be his year. But deep down, Elias wanted more than just a successful crop. He wanted the world to see what his hands had made. He wanted recognition. He needed to be told he was the best. And maybe, just maybe, he needed that validation more than he needed the grain itself. Then the merchant arrived. Victor Hale, a man who bought harvests the way other men bought their daily bread. Cold, efficient, wealthy. He was the richest buyer in 3 counties. He didn't see the sweat in the soil. He only saw the numbers on a ledger. When he stepped out of that carriage, the very air seemed to grow cold. He walked Elias's fields like he already owned them. Elias followed him, his heart pounding against his ribs. His father had sold to Victor's father. This wasn't just a deal, it was his legacy. Victor walked the rows. He counted. He calculated. He said absolutely nothing for what felt like hours. Elias waited for the praise. Finally, Victor stopped. He looked Elias in the eye with a gaze that held no warmth, no respect, just calculation. "It's adequate," Victor said. That one word felt like a blade across Elias's throat. Adequate. 11 years of work. Adequate. Victor offered half the market price, not because the grain wasn't worth more, but because he knew he could. "Take it or leave it," he said. And then Victor smiled. Not a smile of kindness, but a smile of power. "Someone else will take it if you won't," he added. Elias could have said yes. He should have said yes. He could have fed his family, paid his debts, and lived to plant another year. But his pride wouldn't let him. He didn't want the money if it came with an insult. He chose a different path. He chose the fire. That night, the first spark hit the dry stalks. It was justice, he told himself. If Victor didn't value his work, then nobody would have it. He watched the flames climb higher than his farmhouse. He told himself he'd rather have nothing than be treated as adequate. But here is the truth Elias missed. The fire didn't hurt Victor Hale. Victor rode home, ate a warm dinner, and slept without a single thought of the farmer. The next morning, Victor simply bought someone else's harvest. He didn't lose a cent. He didn't lose any sleep. The fire only burned one man. It burned Elias. When the sun rose, there was no gold left, only black earth and gray smoke that tasted like regret. Winter came hard that year, the coldest anyone could remember. Without a harvest to sell, the house grew cold. The pantry grew empty. Elias had no grain to sell, no seed to plant for the spring, no reputation left to borrow against. He learned that pride is the most expensive thing a man can own. His wife couldn't watch their daughter go hungry. "Just until spring," she said, her voice cracking as she left for her sister's home. She didn't come back in the spring. She didn't come back until the middle of the following summer. Elias was truly alone. He walked his dead fields every single morning. 40 acres of nothing but ash and bitter memories. 40 acres of proof of his own folly. He watched his own footprints in the ash and realized that nobody was coming to save him. The world had moved on. Victor had moved on. In that silence, he finally heard the truth. He hadn't burned his harvest to spite Victor. He had burned his own future. He had burned his pride into the ground and found that only ashes remained. There was no glory in the fire, only hunger. But the earth is more forgiving than man. 3 years later, the first real green began to push through the remaining gray. Elias was older now. Gray had taken over his beard. His movements were slower, but they were careful. He planted every seed by hand. The harvest that grew back was smaller, 20 acres instead of 40. He didn't have the strength or the money for more, and that was okay. His daughter was 9 now. She helped him in the rows. She didn't know about the night the sky turned orange. Not yet. She knew her father as a man who worked without complaint. A man who smiled more now than he ever did in the old photographs. One morning, a new buyer came. Not Victor. Just a man looking for good grain at a fair price. He looked at the crop and nodded. He offered a fair price. Not a fortune, but enough. Elias didn't hesitate for a second. "Sold," he said, and he meant it. There was no victory speech, no revenge against Victor Hale, no proving the world wrong, just a man selling what he'd grown. It was enough. The fire had taken everything he thought he wanted. But in the ashes, it had left him with what he actually needed. Perspective. His pride hadn't made the harvest great. His hands had. And as long as he had his hands, he could rebuild anything. Over and over. That night, in their small kitchen, his daughter asked him, "Father, why is our farm smaller than the old pictures?" He looked at her, then at his hands. "I learned something important," he said quietly. "Some fires only destroy the one who starts them. But as long as you have the soil and the seed, you can always start again.